The morning light of late October struggled through the grimy windows of the workshop on Sendlinger Street, casting long shadows across the workbench where our master sat hunched over a delicate rank of wooden pipes. Munich, in the year 1874, was a city caught between its medieval past and industrial future, and nowhere was this more apparent than in the old craftsman's quarter, where the rhythmic hammering of traditional trades competed with the distant whistle of locomotive engines. The master, a man of 48 years, whose hands knew the language of wood and leather better than words, was adjusting the voicing of a small flute stop. Each pipe required individual attention, a scraping here, a gentle widening there, until its voice joined the chorus in perfect harmony. "Like coaxing shy children to sing," he would tell his sister Anna when she complained about the endless hours he spent on such minute adjustments. Anna moved through the workshop now, her presence marked by the rustle of her wool dress and the soft clatter of the breakfast tray. 4 years his junior, she had taken over the household after his Maria passed, though she never let him forget the sacrifice. "Your breakfast grows cold while you commune with your wooden saints," she observed, setting down bread, cheese, and coffee with the particular firmness that suggested disapproval. The workshop itself was a cathedral of organized chaos. Ranks of pipes lined the walls like silent soldiers, sorted by material and pitch. Lead and tin alloy for the principals, aged oak for the wooden flutes, spotted metal for the strings. The air carried the permanent perfume of hot glue, leather treatment, and the particular dustiness of old wood. In the corner, the great bellows of a practice organ wheezed softly, its weights shifting with each breath like a sleeping giant. The master's thoughts, as they often did these days, drifted to the precarious state of his profession. Chancellor Bismarck's Kulturkampf had cast a shadow over Catholic Bavaria, and church commissions had dwindled to a trickle. The great organs that had once been the pride of every parish now stood silent, or worse, were maintained by traveling charlatans who understood nothing of the instrument's soul. Progress, the newspapers called it, this new world where factory-made harmoniums replaced centuries of craftsmanship. A sharp knock interrupted his reverie. Anna returned, her expression curious, carrying a letter on good paper sealed with red wax. The master recognized the quality immediately. His fingers, trained to detect the slightest imperfection in wooden surfaces, could feel the weight and weave of expensive stationery. The seal bore an elaborate coat of arms, an eagle clutching a key. "From Bavaria's heights, it seems," Anna noted, watching as he broke the seal with his penknife. Her voice carried that particular mix of pride and worry that came whenever the aristocracy took notice of common craftsmen. One never knew if such attention brought fortune or trouble. The letter was written in the elaborate script favored by estate secretaries, full of flourishes and formal phrases that took 3 times as many words as necessary to convey simple meaning. Schloss Adlerstein, near Garmisch-Partenkirchen, requested his immediate attendance regarding a matter of utmost delicacy concerning their chapel organ. The Countess von Steinberg herself had specifically requested him, having heard of his reputation from the Bishop of Augsburg. The master set down the letter and found himself calculating. The journey would take 2 days, perhaps 3 with the mountain roads. The fee, though not specified, would certainly exceed what he might earn in a month of small repairs. Yet something in the letter's tone, a certain urgency beneath the formal language, suggested this was more than routine maintenance. The Steinbergs, Anna mused, reading over his shoulder despite his mild protest. Old Catholic family. The Count died recently. I read in the Münchner Neueste. Left everything to the church, they say, though there was talk of family disputes. She paused, then added with her characteristic practicality, They pay their bills, which is more than can be said for half your customers these days. Outside, the bells of the Frauenkirche began their noon song, a cascade of bronze voices that made every organ builder's heart quicken. The master listened, identifying each bell by its overtones, a habit so ingrained he couldn't stop if he wanted to. The great bass bell had developed a slight crack, he noted. Soon someone would have to attend to that, though bell founding was a different craft, one that required furnaces and courage in equal measure. He looked around his workshop, at the half-finished projects that would have to wait, at the temperamental practice organ that served as his testing ground, at the portrait of Maria that Anna had insisted remain on the wall, despite his protests that it brought more pain than comfort. 3 years now since the consumption took her. 3 years of Anna's household management and gentle nagging about finding another wife. A man needs more than wood and metal for company, she would say, to which he would reply that wood and metal, at least, behaved predictably. The truth, which he would never speak aloud, was that his work had become his refuge. In the precise mathematics of pipe scales, in the absolute requirements of harmonics, he found an order that life itself steadfastly refused to provide. An organ, properly built and maintained, would sing true for centuries. People, he had learned, offered no such reliability. "You'll go, of course," Anna stated, rather than asked, already mentally cataloging what he would need for the journey. "I'll prepare your traveling case. The good tools, not the everyday ones. The aristocracy notices such things." She paused at the workshop door, her expression softening. "It might do you good, getting out of Munich for a while. The mountain air clears the head, they say." The master nodded, his fingers already reaching for his leather-bound notebook where he recorded every organ he had ever worked on. There would be research to do. The Schloss Adlerstein organ, if memory served, was built in the last century by the Silbermann workshop, an instrument of considerable size and sophistication. Whatever delicate matter required his attention, he would need to be prepared. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the workshop floor, he began his preparations with the methodical care that marked all his work. Each tool was cleaned, oiled, and wrapped in soft leather. His tuning forks, polished brass that sang perfect pitch when struck, went into their velvet-lined case. The specialized listening rods, thin metal tubes that could detect the slightest whisper of air escaping from a faulty valve, were counted and secured. The 3rd of November brought the kind of bitter morning that reminded all of Bavaria that winter was no longer a distant threat, but an approaching certainty. Our master stood on the platform of Munich's grand central station, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air, while steam from the waiting locomotive mixed with morning fog to create a dreamlike atmosphere. The station, still new enough that its stone facades hadn't yet been darkened by coal smoke, represented everything modern about the new German Empire. Iron and glass reaching toward the sky, the triumph of engineering over nature. The second-class compartment was nearly empty, a blessing that allowed him to spread his traveling cases on the opposite bench. Through the window, Bavaria unfolded like a medieval manuscript, each valley and hillside telling its own story. The train curved south toward the Alps, passing through villages where church spires still dominated the skyline, their bells briefly audible over the rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails. Progress and tradition, he thought, watching a farmer with an ox-drawn plow working a field parallel to the railway line, forever dancing their awkward waltz. As the mountains grew larger, filling more of the window with each passing hour, the master found himself thinking about the nature of sound in mountain valleys, how it echoed and transformed, how a single note could become a chord simply by bouncing off stone walls. The castle organ would sound different than city instruments, he knew. The cold mountain air, the stone acoustics, the very altitude would affect the pipe's speech. His notebook already contained several pages of calculations, adjusting his standard measurements for these factors. The train stopped at Garmisch in late afternoon, depositing him onto a platform where the mountain air hit his lungs like cold wine. Herr Gottfried, the estate steward, waited with a carriage, not the grand ceremonial coach one might expect, but a practical covered wagon suited for mountain roads. Gottfried himself was a man of perhaps 45 years, built like someone who had spent his life solving practical problems with practical solutions. His handshake was firm, his greeting polite but brief. "The Countess is anxious for your arrival," he said, helping to load the cases. "The situation has worsened." The road to Schloss Adlerstein wound upward through pine forests so dense that twilight seemed to come an hour early. Gottfried handled the horses with practiced ease, while providing a careful commentary on the estate, the kind of information a thoughtful steward knew a visitor might need. The castle has been in the family for 300 years. The late Count, God rest his soul, was a man of deep faith. The chapel was his particular pride. Through the trees the master caught his first glimpse of Schloss Adlerstein. Not the fairy tale palace that dotted other Bavarian peaks, but a serious fortress from an earlier age, its towers and walls speaking of centuries when defense mattered more than comfort. As they approached the gates, Gottfried's voice dropped slightly. "You should know, Herr Master, that the household is unsettled. What happens in the chapel at night has affected everyone. The servants whisper of supernatural things, though I put no stock in such talk myself." The courtyard was lit by torches that threw dancing shadows against stone walls. As the master climbed from the carriage, he heard it, a low, mournful chord that seemed to rise from the very stones, hanging in the air for several seconds before fading into silence. Even he, who understood the mechanics of sound better than most, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Gottfried noticed his reaction. "Every night now," the steward said quietly. "Always between 2 and 3 in the morning. But you hear it sometimes at dusk, too, when the wind is right." The Countess received him in a sitting room where religious paintings dominated the walls and a silver crucifix reflected the firelight. Magdalena von Steinberg was a woman who wore her 62 years with dignity rather than attempting to hide them. Dressed in mourning black that had become her permanent attire, she possessed the particular combination of fragility and steel that marked aristocratic widows who had outlived their primary purpose, but not their will. "My husband spoke to me," she said without preamble, her voice carrying absolute conviction. "Through the organ. He is distressed about something, unable to rest." She gestured toward a portrait above the mantelpiece, Count Friedrich von Steinberg in his prime, a man whose face suggested both piety and the kind of stubborn pride that built castles on mountaintops. "Father Antonius believes it may be a divine sign, though he counsels patience and prayer." The master chose his words carefully, aware that skepticism would end his commission before it began. "Your ladyship, in my experience, organs can indeed produce unexpected sounds. The instrument in your chapel is particularly fine, I understand. Built by the Silbermann workshop?" "In 1792, the Countess confirmed, warming slightly to someone who appreciated such details. "Friedrich had it completely restored for our wedding 35 years ago. He spent hours there playing hymns." He was quite accomplished, though he would never admit it. Modesty was among his virtues. A younger man entered without knocking, carrying himself with the particular confidence of someone who believed his bloodline entitled him to such freedoms. Ernst von Steinberg, the master recognized from Gottfried's earlier description, the Count's nephew who had resided at the castle for the past 5 years. Where the Countess was thin from grief, Ernst was thin from ambition. His sharp features and calculating eyes suggesting a mind that saw everything in terms of advantage and disadvantage. "Aunt Magdalena, surely we shouldn't trouble our guest before he's even settled," Ernst said, though his tone suggested concern for neither his aunt nor the guest. His eyes assessed the master like a merchant evaluating goods. "I trust Gottfried has arranged appropriate accommodation. The servants' quarters, I assume?" "The blue room in the East Tower," the Countess corrected firmly. "Our guest is here at my personal invitation." The subtle emphasis on "my" didn't escape anyone present. The master recognized the undercurrents immediately, a household divided, with the supernatural mystery serving as another battlefield for very earthly conflicts. That night, installed in a room that was indeed blue and commanded a spectacular view of the valley below, the master lay awake, waiting. The castle sounds were different from city noise, wood settling in the cold, wind finding gaps in ancient stones, the distant call of a night bird. Then, at exactly 15 minutes past 2, it came. The chord rose from somewhere below, a perfect minor triad in what his trained ear identified as F minor, sustained impossibly long for any human player. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, the kind of sound that could indeed convince a grieving widow that the dead were speaking. But the master heard something else. Something that made him sit up in bed with sudden interest. The chord was too perfect, too consistent. Natural phenomena were never so precise. Whatever was producing this sound, it followed rules, patterns. And patterns, he had learned in his 48 years, were always the product of either nature's laws or human design. The question was which? And more importantly, why someone might want to blur that distinction. Morning arrived with frost patterns on the windows that looked like frozen sheet music, abstract and beautiful. The master rose early, his craftsman's habits unbroken by the aristocratic setting, and made his way through corridors where portraits of long-dead Steinbergs watched his passage with painted eyes. The castle, in daylight, was less mysterious but more melancholic. Its grandeur faded like old silk, maintaining dignity despite obvious decline. The chapel occupied the entire height of the North Tower, a Gothic jewel that had somehow survived 3 centuries of changing fashion. Light filtered through stained glass windows depicting the life of Saint Cecilia, patron of music, casting colored shadows across worn stone floors. But it was the organ that commanded attention, a magnificent instrument that filled the entire west wall, its pipes rising like a golden forest toward the vaulted ceiling, its carved case a masterwork of Baroque exuberance. "Magnificent, isn't she?" The voice belonged to Father Antonius, who had entered silently, a skill perhaps learned from years of moving through sacred spaces. The priest was 55, with the kind of face that suggested he had seen enough of human nature to be surprised by nothing, yet disappointed by everything. The Count spent a fortune on the last restoration. Every pipe was cleaned, every leather valve replaced. That was 15 years ago. The master was already examining the console, running his fingers along the keyboards without pressing any keys, feeling for wear patterns that would tell him how the instrument had been played. 3 manuals plus pedals, 42 stops according to his count, mechanical action that would have been considered old-fashioned even when it was built. "Has anyone been maintaining it since?" he asked, noting several amateur repairs that made his professional soul wince. "The Count himself did minor adjustments," Father Antonius replied, his tone carefully neutral. "He was quite protective of the instrument. Since his death, no one has touched it. Well, except for Ernst, who insisted on checking if someone was hiding inside playing tricks. He spent an entire night here with 2 servants as witnesses." The master opened the first of his cases, removing tools wrapped in soft leather like surgical instruments. His examination would need to be methodical, starting with the visible and working toward the hidden. Every organ had secrets, places where builders left their marks, shortcuts taken when time or money ran short. This one would be no different. "Tell me about the Count's death," he said, keeping his tone conversational while he worked. "A stroke, quite sudden. He was found here, actually, seated at the console. Morning prayers, the feast of St. Lawrence. The physician said he went quickly, probably felt nothing." The priest paused, then added, "The will was read the next day. Everything to the church, specifically to endow a monastery school. Ernst was disappointed." A young woman entered, carrying a tray with bread, cheese, and beer. Simple food, but good quality. The master recognized her from last evening's dinner service, though servants were meant to be invisible in such houses. Liesel, he recalled Gottfried mentioning her name. 19 years old, with the kind of quick intelligence that looked out through careful eyes. She set the tray on a carved pew, but instead of leaving immediately, she lingered. "You're not afraid of it, then?" she asked, nodding toward the organ. "Most won't come in here alone anymore." Before Father Antonius could reprimand her for speaking out of turn, the master smiled. "I've spent my life with these instruments. If they could harm anyone, I'd have been dead long ago." He noticed her eyes flick toward the organ loft, then back. "You've heard it often?" "Every night since August," she replied, warming to his friendly manner. "Always the same sound, like someone crying, but musical. Cook says it's the Count wanting his property sorted proper, but—" She caught herself glancing at Father Antonius. "That will do, Liesel," the priest said firmly, but not unkindly. After she left, he sighed. "The servants have their theories. Everyone does." The Countess believes it's her husband's spirit. Ernst claims it's mechanical failure that happens to sound supernatural. He trailed off. "And what do you believe, Father?" the master asked, removing panels to access the wind chests, noting that someone had indeed been here recently, fresh scratches on screws that shouldn't have been touched. "I believe God works in ways we don't always understand," Father Antonius said carefully. "Whether through spirits or springs, divine will manifests." It was a diplomatic answer that said nothing while seeming to say everything. The master spent the morning mapping the organ's structure,
2,300 pipes, he calculated, ranging from tiny whistles no bigger than his thumb to wooden bass pipes that could hold a small child. The wind system was particularly interesting. 6 separate bellows operated by weights rather than the newer system of pedaled feeders. This meant constant pressure even when no one was playing.
Especially when no one was playing. Ernst von Steinberg appeared just before noon, dressed for riding, but clearly making a detour to check on progress. "Finding anything interesting?" he asked, his casual tone betrayed by the intensity of his attention. "Several things," the master replied truthfully. "This instrument has been modified recently. See these marks? Fresh. Someone has been adjusting the pipe regulation, though rather crudely." He watched Ernst's face carefully, noting a slight tightening around the eyes. "Probably my uncle's work," Ernst said quickly. "He fancied himself quite the expert. Wouldn't let anyone else touch his precious organ." The bitterness in that last sentence was unmistakable. "Spent more time here than with his family. Some of us thought it unhealthy. An old man's obsession." The master continued his work while Ernst watched, clearly wanting to ask more, but uncertain how to proceed without seeming too interested. Finally, the younger man spoke again. "My aunt puts great stock in this phenomenon. It would be unfortunate if a simple mechanical explanation disappointed her. She's fragile, you understand. Her faith is all she has left." "I find," the master said carefully, testing the weight of a particular valve spring, "that truth has a way of being more comforting than mystery, even when it's mundane." Ernst's laugh was short and humorless. "You don't know my aunt. She'd rather have a singing ghost than a squeaking hinge. The ghost, at least, confirms her worldview." He turned to leave, then paused. "I trust you'll be thoughtful in your conclusions. The household depends on the Countess's stability." Alone again, the master climbed into the organ case itself, entering the forest of pipes where few, besides builders, ever ventured. The smell was overwhelming: old wood, leather treatments, the particular metallic scent of lead-tin alloy. In the dimness, lit only by gaps between pipes, he could see the mechanical action spreading like a wooden nervous system. Thousands of connections, translating the organist's touch into music. It was here, in the semi-darkness among the larger wooden pipes, that he found the first real clue. 3 pipes of the bourdon rank, their mouths modified so slightly that casual inspection would miss it. But the master's fingers, trained to detect variations measured in millimeters, found the deliberate scratches immediately. Someone had scored the wood, creating tiny channels that would cause air to escape in a very specific way under certain conditions. He made notes in his leather journal, sketching the modifications with precise detail. The work was clever, but amateur. Someone with understanding, but not mastery. As afternoon light began to fail, casting the chapel into golden gloom, he emerged from the organ case covered in dust, but satisfied with his initial findings. The phantom chord was no phantom, that much was certain. But who had created it, and why, remained mysteries that would require more than mechanical knowledge to solve. The master prepared for his night vigil with the same methodical care he brought to any complex repair. A blanket borrowed from his room, a small lantern with the wick trimmed low, his listening rods, and most importantly, a thermometer he had requested from the castle's modest laboratory, where the late Count had pursued amateur scientific interests. By 11 o'clock on this 5th of November, He had positioned himself in the organ loft, hidden among the facade pipes where he could observe without being observed. The chapel at night transformed into something altogether different from its daytime self. Moonlight through stained glass created phantom colors that shifted with passing clouds. Every small sound amplified in the silence, the settling of old wood, the scurry of mice in the walls, the distant howl of wind across the tower's apex. The master found himself thinking about the nature of fear, how darkness and silence could make even rational men question their reason. "We are creatures of daylight," he mused, "forever suspicious of what moves in shadow." Midnight passed without incident. He checked his thermometer regularly, noting the steady drop in temperature as the castle stones released their stored heat into the November night. 12 degrees, 11, 10. His breath became visible around 1:30. The organ pipes, he knew, were contracting slightly, their pitch sharpening by microscopic amounts that only trained ears might detect. At 2 o'clock, Ernst von Steinberg entered the chapel. The master, concealed in his vantage point, watched as the younger man moved with the confidence of someone who believed himself unobserved. Ernst carried no light, navigating by moonlight and familiarity. He paused at the console, running his fingers along the stop knobs without pulling any, then moved behind the organ case to where the bellows machinery stood. The master heard rather than saw what happened next. A subtle manipulation of weights, a careful adjustment of the wind trunk valves. Ernst was doing something to the wind system, though from his position, the master couldn't determine exactly what. After perhaps 5 minutes, Ernst departed as quietly as he had come, leaving through the sacristy door that connected to the family quarters. At 13 minutes past 2, the temperature read 7 degrees. At 14 minutes, something shifted in the organ's breathing. The master felt it before he heard it. A change in air pressure, subtle but definite. The weights on the bellows system, which had been perfectly balanced, began to sink slowly. Air was entering the wind chests without anyone pumping or playing. Then it came. The chord rose from the belly of the instrument like a living thing. That perfect F minor triad that seemed to contain all the sorrow of the world. But now, positioned inside the instrument itself, the master could hear its component parts, 3 pipes speaking, their carefully modified mouths, creating the exact frequencies needed. The scratches he had found earlier weren't random. They were calculated to produce these specific pitches when air passed through at this exact pressure. He climbed down quietly, moving to the bellows room where Ernst had been. The mechanism was ingenious in its simplicity. The leather of certain bellows had been treated with something that made them contract more dramatically in cold temperatures. This created a pressure differential that slowly forced air through a specific channel, one that had been modified to remain slightly open rather than sealing completely. The cold night air did the rest, creating the exact conditions needed for those 3 scarred pipes to speak. "Remarkable," he whispered to himself, admiring the cleverness despite its dishonest purpose. Someone had turned the entire organ into a barometer of temperature, a clock that chimed only when conditions were perfect. But Ernst's involvement complicated things. Was he the creator of this phenomenon, or merely its guardian? Footsteps on the stairs interrupted his investigation. The master quickly moved to the center of the chapel, making himself obvious rather than suspicious.
Liesel appeared, wrapped in a thick shawl, carrying a candle that threw dancing shadows across her worried face. "I heard it," she said simply. "I came to see if you needed anything." But her eyes weren't on him. They were on the organ, which continued its mournful song for another 10 seconds before fading to silence.
"You're not afraid," he observed, noting how she stood steady despite the eeriness of the situation. She shrugged, a gesture that seemed too worldly for a kitchen maid. "Fear and understanding can't live in the same house," my grandmother used to say. She could read, taught me before she died. The priest at our village said it was unnecessary for girls, but grandmother said knowledge was light in darkness. She paused, realizing she had revealed something significant. "You won't tell?" The countess wouldn't approve. "Servants who read get ideas," she says. The master found himself smiling, despite the strange circumstances. "Your secret is safe, but perhaps you could help me understand something. The Count's death. Were there any unusual circumstances? Anything that might explain why Ernst seems so concerned about this phenomenon?" Liesel glanced around nervously, then stepped closer. "The will was supposed to be different. Ernst had letters, promises from the Count about inheritance. But the final will, signed just a week before his death, left everything to the church. Ernst claims his uncle wasn't in his right mind, but the priest and the notary say otherwise." A door slammed somewhere in the castle, the sound echoing through stone corridors. Liesel startled. "I should go. Cook will skin me if she finds I've been wandering." She hurried toward the door, then turned back. "The Count used to play hymns every morning at 6, beautiful ones, full of joy. This sound? It's nothing like how he played. It's too sad, too empty. Whatever's making it, it's not his spirit. His spirit would play something that lifted hearts, not chilled them." Alone again, the master returned to his investigation with new purpose. He examined the bellows more carefully, finding traces of a chemical treatment on the leather, something that responded dramatically to temperature changes. In his notebook, he sketched the entire mechanism, from the modified bellows to the scarred pipes, creating a technical diagram of an elaborate deception. By 4 in the morning, the temperature had risen slightly, and the conditions for the phantom chord had passed. The master packed his tools, his mind already working on how to present his findings. The mechanical mystery was solved, but the human mystery remained. Ernst's manipulation of the phenomenon was clear, but was he its creator? And how could the master reveal the truth without destroying the fragile peace of the household? As dawn light began to creep across the mountains, painting the peaks rose and gold, he climbed to his room in the blue tower. From his window he could see the castle cemetery, where Count Friedrich von Steinberg lay in his fresh grave, marked by a simple stone cross, as befitted his modest faith. "You played no part in this deception," the master said quietly to the distant grave. "But your death has become its instrument, as surely as those pipes were carved to sing their false lament." The complexity of human motivation, he reflected, far exceeded any mechanical puzzle. Pipes and bellows followed physical laws, predictable and measurable. But the human heart operated by rules that no craftsman's manual contained, creating harmonies and discordances that no tuning could ever perfect. The 7th of November brought unexpected snow, transforming Schloss Adlerstein into something from a fairy tale, though the master knew fairy tales often contained more darkness than their pretty surfaces suggested. He had spent the previous day in careful observation, noting patterns in the household routine, the comings and goings of various residents, the subtle alliances and tensions that governed castle life. Now, armed with this knowledge, he was ready for a deeper investigation. The organ's interior had become his temporary kingdom, a maze of wood and metal where he could work undisturbed for hours. He had strung small oil lamps throughout the case, creating pools of light that revealed details invisible in normal circumstances. The modification to the 3 bourdon pipes was only part of the mechanism, he had determined. There had to be more, some controlling element that determined when the phenomenon would occur. His fingers, sensitive as a physician's, traced the air channels from the modified bellows through the wind chests. Here, behind the facade pipes where dust had accumulated for decades, he found what he was looking for. A small brass valve, no bigger than a pocket watch, installed where it had no business being. The valve was connected to a thin copper tube that ran along the main wind trunk, disappearing into the maze of mechanical action. Ingenious and criminal in equal measure, he murmured, sketching the addition in his notebook. The valve was designed to open only under specific pressure conditions, those that occurred when the temperature dropped to exactly the range he had measured during his nighttime vigil. But the truly clever part was how it had been disguised to look like original work, patinated to match the surrounding brass, installed with screws that appeared centuries old. A gentle cough announced Father Antonius's presence. The priest stood at the entrance to the organ case, his expression unreadable. "You work with remarkable dedication," he observed. "Most men would have declared it supernatural and collected their fee." The master emerged from the pipework, dust in his hair making him look prematurely aged. "Most men haven't spent their lives learning how wood and metal can be made to lie," he replied carefully. "Every organ has a voice, Father. This one is being forced to speak words not its own." Father Antonius moved closer, lowering his voice. "You found something." It wasn't a question. "Something that explains our nocturnal visitor?" "I found evidence of recent modifications disguised as old work. Someone with knowledge but not expertise has been treating this organ like a sort of musical clock, set to chime under precise conditions." The master watched the priest's face carefully. "The question is whether revealing this truth serves any purpose beyond satisfying curiosity." The priest was quiet for a long moment, his fingers absently tracing the carved symbols on a nearby prayer stand. "Truth is like light, they say. It reveals things as they are, not as we wish them to be. But sometimes, Master, people need their illusions more than they need truth. The Countess finds comfort in believing her husband speaks to her. Who are we to take that comfort away?" Before the master could respond, Liesel appeared with his midday meal. But today she also carried something else, a leather portfolio that she handled with obvious care. "I thought you might want to see these," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure they were alone. "From the Count's study. Sheet music in his hand. Compositions he was working on before he died." The master opened the portfolio carefully. The pages were covered with musical notation, hymn arrangements mostly, but also original compositions. The handwriting was precise, controlled, the work of someone who understood music deeply. At the bottom of one page, a note in the same hand.
for M when the silence becomes too much to bear. M would be the Countess, Father Antonius said softly. They were devoted to each other, perhaps to excess. Neither had much room in their hearts for others. He paused, then added meaningfully, Ernst arrived 5 years ago, when his own father died bankrupt. The Count took him in from duty, not affection. The master studied the musical notations more carefully.
The Count's compositions were sophisticated, showing real understanding of harmony and counterpoint. Then, something caught his eye. A sketch in the margin of one page, a mechanical diagram that looked remarkably similar to the valve system he had just discovered. But this sketch showed it as a repair, not a modification. "Father," he said slowly, "when did the Count last perform major maintenance on the organ?" "This past spring, April or May. He spent weeks at it, wouldn't let anyone help. Said it was his form of prayer, caring for the instrument." The priest's eyes sharpened. "Why do you ask?" The master showed him the sketch. "Because I believe the Count discovered something wrong with his organ, something someone else had done to it. See this notation? Found foreign addition, must investigate further. And here, someone has been tampering with my instrument." Liesel had been examining another page. "Look at this date," she said suddenly. "August 3rd. That's 2 days before he died. And see what he's written? He knows more than he admits. Must confront after feast day." The three of them stood in silence, the implications settling like dust. If the Count had discovered the modifications, if he had suspected Ernst, then his sudden death took on a different character. Not murder, perhaps, but certainly convenient. And the phantom chord beginning after his death? Was it Ernst activating a mechanism the Count had discovered, but not yet removed? "We must be very careful," Father Antonius said finally. "Accusations without proof destroy lives. And even with proof, what justice could there be? The Count is dead. The will is executed. The Countess believes what comforts her." The master returned to his work with new understanding. He traced every modification now, finding several more subtle alterations, each designed to work in concert with the others. The chemical treatment on the bellows leather, he determined through careful testing, was a mixture of fish oil and copper salts, which caused dramatic contraction in cold temperatures. Applied selectively, it created the precise pressure differential needed. As afternoon wore toward evening, Ernst appeared in the chapel, his demeanor casual, but his eyes alert. "Still working, I see. My aunt grows impatient for answers. She hopes you'll confirm her husband's presence, of course. Women and their sentimental notions." "I find," the master said evenly, continuing his work, "that the dead speak to us through what they leave behind, their work, their words, their uncompleted tasks." Ernst's smile didn't reach his eyes. "How poetic. Though I prefer the living to the dead. They're more predictable." He moved closer, watching the master's hands. "That valve you're examining, part of the original mechanism?" The master met his gaze steadily. "Your uncle was a meticulous man. He documented everything, including modifications he discovered but hadn't yet repaired." The color drained from Ernst's face, but he recovered quickly. "My uncle saw conspiracies everywhere toward the end. Age does that to some men. Makes them paranoid, suspicious of those who only want to help." "Perhaps," the master said, returning to his work. Or perhaps experience teaches us that help often comes with a price not advertised in advance. The formal dinner on the 8th of November was announced by a servant in livery so old the gold braid had turned green. The master, unaccustomed to such ceremonies, found himself seated at a table that could have accommodated 20, but held only 5. The countess presided from the head, Ernst to her right, Father Antonius to her left, and the master positioned carefully between the priest and empty chairs that seemed to wait for guests who would never arrive. The dining hall itself was a monument to faded glory. Tapestries depicting hunting scenes where moths had edited the narrative. A ceiling painted with cherubs whose faces had darkened with centuries of candle smoke. The countess ate sparingly, her movements precise as a clockwork figure, while Ernst attacked his meal with the enthusiasm of someone who understood that inheritance delayed was still inheritance eventual. "My husband collected instruments," the countess said suddenly, her voice cutting through the careful silence. "Not just the organ. There's a clavichord in the music room, a positive organ in the summer chapel. He believed music was the language angels spoke before words were invented." She turned to the master. "Do you believe in angels, Herr Master?" The master considered his wine, a Riesling from the castle's own vineyard that tasted of slate and centuries. "I believe in what can be measured and proven, your ladyship. But I also know that not everything important can be measured. Music itself teaches us this. The same notes can produce joy or sorrow, depending on their arrangement." "Spoken like a true craftsman," Ernst interjected, his tone suggesting this wasn't a compliment. "Everything reduced to mechanics and mathematics. Though I suppose that's what my aunt is paying you for, to reduce our mystery to mundane causes." The countess's expression sharpened. "I am paying for truth, Ernst, whatever that truth might be." But her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass, betraying the confidence in her voice. Father Antonius smoothly changed the subject. "Tell us about Munich, Master. We hear the city is much changed with the new prosperity. Factories rising everywhere, they say." The master found himself describing his workshop, the old craftsman's quarter slowly being surrounded by modern industry. He spoke of the challenge facing traditional trades, how machine-made goods were replacing handcraft, how the railways brought competition from distant places. "Progress, they call it," he said, unable to keep slight bitterness from his voice. "Though what we're progressing toward, no one seems certain." "Progress is just another word for change," Ernst said, warming to a topic he clearly enjoyed. "And change favors those prepared to embrace it. My uncle, God rest him, lived in the past. This castle, this whole way of life. It's a museum, not a home. Germany is becoming modern, industrial. Those who adapt survive." The countess's voice could have frozen the wine in their glasses. "Your uncle preserved what deserved preserving. Tradition, faith, culture. These aren't commodities to be discarded when fashion changes." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by the soft clink of silver on porcelain. The master noticed how the servants moved through the room like ghosts, trained to be invisible, though Liesel caught his eye once, her expression suggesting she heard and remembered everything. "I received a letter today," the countess said, changing the subject with aristocratic abruptness, "from the bishop. He's very interested in our situation. The church is careful about endorsing miracles, but they're equally careful not to dismiss them. He may send an investigator." Ernst's knuckles whitened around his knife. Surely that's premature, Aunt. We haven't even heard what our expert has discovered. The master will share his findings when he's ready, Father Antonius said diplomatically. Truth shouldn't be rushed, lest we mistake incomplete understanding for final answers. After dinner, the master found himself in the music room with the Countess, examining the clavichord her husband had treasured. It was a beautiful instrument, its case painted with scenes from mythology, its keyboard worn smooth by generations of fingers. She played a simple melody, haunting in its melancholy. "Friedrich composed this for our 25th anniversary," she said softly. "He said it captured how he felt when he first saw me. Joy and terror in equal measure." She stopped playing, her hands resting on the keys. "We had no children, you know. God didn't bless us that way. Ernst says it's why Friedrich became obsessed with his music. Compensation for what we lacked. But Ernst understands nothing of love or loss." The master listened to the silence that followed, hearing in it all the unspoken griefs of a marriage that had been everything to two people and nothing to anyone else. "Your husband's music lives on," he offered gently. "That's a form of immortality." "Is it?" She turned to face him fully. "Or is it just sound waves, dissipating into nothing, as Ernst would say?" "Tell me, Master, you who understand how these instruments work, is there anything in them that transcends mere mechanics? Any space for the soul?" Before he could answer, a letter arrived, delivered by Gottfried with an expression of concern. The master recognized his sister Anna's handwriting immediately. The Countess, with impeccable courtesy, excused herself to allow him privacy. Anna's letter brought troubling news from Munich. His rival Herr Zimmermann had been spreading rumors about the master abandoning commissions for aristocratic adventures. 2 potential clients had already withdrawn their interest. Moreover, the practice organ in the workshop had developed a serious problem. The main wind chest was leaking, and Anna didn't trust anyone else to repair it. "Your absence is noted and commented upon," she wrote. "The vultures circle when they think the eagle has abandoned his nest." The master folded the letter slowly, feeling the weight of his 2 worlds pulling in opposite directions. Here in this castle, he was uncovering a mystery that seemed to grow more complex with each discovery. But his real life, his reputation, his livelihood waited in Munich, vulnerable to those who would exploit his absence. Ernst found him in the corridor, returning to his room. "Troubling news from home? You look concerned." "Business matters," the master replied curtly. "Nothing that need concern the household." Ernst smiled, the expression of a card player who had just seen his opponents tell. "Business is always concerning, isn't it? We all have our obligations, our necessities. Even my aunt, for all her wealth, understands that resources aren't infinite. The church will take most of the estate, you know. What remains won't sustain this castle for another generation. Then perhaps your generation should find other sustenance," the master suggested, his patience wearing thin. Ernst's face darkened. Easy words from someone who has a trade. Some of us were raised for a world that no longer exists, trained for positions that progress has eliminated. What would you have us do? Become clerks? Factory foremen?
The master heard real pain beneath the anger, the desperation of a man watching his world dissolve. It didn't excuse whatever Ernst had done, but it explained it. "We all face obsolescence," he said quietly. "The only choice is how we meet it, with dignity or deception." The morning of November 9th brought crystalline clarity to the mountain air, the kind of day when every sound carried perfectly and every detail stood sharp against the sky. The master had worked through the night, mapping every connection, every valve, every modified component of the organ's elaborate deception.
His notebook now contained enough evidence to explain the phantom chord completely, but understanding the mechanism and deciding what to do with that knowledge were very different matters. He stood before the organ's main wind chest, where the crucial modifications clustered like a mechanical conspiracy. The copper tube he had discovered ran to a secondary valve system hidden beneath the pedal board, invisible unless one knew exactly where to look. This valve was connected to a mercury switch, a delicate glass tube partially filled with quicksilver that would make contact between two wires when tilted by temperature-induced pressure changes. "Mercury," he murmured, testing the connection with his multimeter. "Expensive, precise, and dangerous if mishandled." The sophistication suggested someone with more knowledge than Ernst had displayed. But then, the master reflected, people often hid their true capabilities until necessity forced revelation. The temperature-sensitive leather treatment proved to be even more complex than he had initially thought. Testing samples with different solutions from the castle's modest laboratory, he identified not just fish oil and copper salts, but also a trace of nitric acid, enough to slowly deteriorate the leather over time. The phantom chord wasn't just a deception. It was designed to worsen, to become more dramatic as weeks passed. Liesel appeared with his breakfast, but also with information. "Herr Ernst left early this morning for Munich," she said quietly. "Urgent business," he claimed, though the stable boy said he seemed more frightened than urgent. The master's heart sank. His investigation had been noticed, his discoveries suspected. Ernst's flight suggested guilt, but it also removed any chance of confrontation or confession. Did he take much with him? 2 cases and a portfolio of papers. The Countess doesn't know yet. He left a letter saying he'd return within the week. She paused, then added, "There's something else. I found this in the Count's study, hidden behind other books." She produced a slim journal, its leather binding cracked with age. The master opened it carefully, recognizing the Count's precise handwriting. But these weren't musical notations. They were observations, dated entries going back 2 years. The Count had been documenting small irregularities, missing items, financial discrepancies. Ernst's name appeared frequently, always in connection with something questionable, but never quite criminal. An entry from July caught his attention. E asked detailed questions about the organ's construction, claims interest in preservation, but his questions are too specific, too focused on the wind system. What does he plan? And then, dated August 1st, just days before the Count's death, found evidence of tampering in the chapel. Someone has been experimenting with the organ's mechanics. If E is responsible, I must act. But accusation without proof would destroy M's peace. After the feast, I will confront him privately. The master closed the journal slowly. The Count had known, or at least suspected. His sudden death, while perhaps natural, had prevented that confrontation.
and Ernst, whether through guilt or opportunism, had activated his mechanism after the funeral, turning his uncle's beloved instrument into a tool for manipulation. Father Antonius arrived as Liesel departed, his face grave. "The Countess wishes to know when you'll present your findings. The bishop's investigator arrives tomorrow, and she wants your report first." "I could present the mechanical facts immediately," the master replied. "But, Father, we both know this involves more than mechanics. Ernst has fled, possibly permanently. The Countess believes she hears her husband's voice."
What good comes from destroying that belief? The priest sat heavily on a carved bench, suddenly looking all of his 55 years. "I've struggled with this same question. Truth versus comfort. Knowledge versus faith. But consider, if the Countess discovers the deception later, the betrayal will be doubled. Better honest grief than false hope." The master spent the afternoon preparing his demonstration. He would show the Countess exactly how the phantom chord was produced, but without directly accusing Ernst, who was, after all, absent and unable to defend himself. The mechanism would speak for itself. He made one significant modification, removing the mercury switch and replacing it with a simple mechanical governor that would prevent the phenomenon from occurring regardless of temperature. The organ would never again produce its phantom chord, but the evidence of how it had been done would remain for those who wished to see it. As the sun began its descent behind the western peaks, the master made one final discovery. Hidden in the largest pass pipe, wrapped in oilcloth, was a packet of letters. Ernst's correspondence with a firm in Vienna, negotiating the sale of various items from the castle, silver, paintings, books, all described as his personal property. The dates went back 3 years, long before the Count's death. Ernst had been slowly pillaging the estate, using his uncle's trust as cover for theft. The final letter, dated just a week ago, was different. It discussed the effectiveness of our arrangement and mentioned the old woman's growing dependence on spiritual comfort. The signature was illegible, but the implication was clear. Ernst wasn't working alone. Someone had helped design the organ modification, someone with technical knowledge and darker motives. The master carefully replaced everything except one letter. Proof, if proof was needed, but not so much that it would destroy the Countess entirely. He thought of his sister Anna's words about truth being a sharp blade that cut both ways. Sometimes, he reflected, the craftsman's job was not just to fix what was broken, but to decide what was worth preserving. That evening, the phantom chord sounded for what would be the last time. The master stood in the chapel listening to that perfect F minor triad rise and fall, understanding now every aspect of its creation. The 3 scarred pipes, the pressure differential, the temperature trigger, the mercury switch, all working in concert to create an illusion that had nearly succeeded in its purpose. But as the sound faded into the stone silence of the chapel, he found himself thinking not of Ernst's deception or the Countess's grief, but of the Count himself, dying at his beloved organ, perhaps suspecting, but not knowing for certain, that his nephew had betrayed him. The real ghost in this castle wasn't a sound, but an absence. The absence of trust between blood relatives, the absence of honest communication, the absence of love that might have prevented all of this. Tomorrow he would present his findings,
carefully edited to reveal truth without destroying hope. The bishop's investigator would confirm his conclusions, Ernst would remain conveniently absent, and the countess would have to decide what she believed. The master's role was almost finished, his duty to the truth balanced against his compassion for human frailty.
The 11th of November dawned gray and uncertain, matching the master's mood as he prepared for what would surely be the most delicate conversation of his professional life. The bishop's investigator had arrived late the previous evening, a young Dominican priest named Brother Thomas, whose sharp eyes and careful questions suggested Rome trained its miracle investigators as thoroughly as any detective. Father Antonius intercepted the master after morning prayers, his expression troubled. "I must speak with you," he said urgently, guiding him to the sacristy where privacy was assured. "I've carried this burden too long, and your investigation has made my silence impossible." The older priest sat heavily, his hands clasped as if in prayer. "I knew about the modifications to the organ, not at first, but I discovered them in September, a month before you arrived. I was preparing for the Feast of St. Michael when I noticed the unusual wear patterns on certain stops, evidence of tampering." The master listened without judgment, recognizing the weight of confession in the priest's voice. "You said nothing." "What could I say? The countess had just begun to find comfort in believing her husband spoke to her. She had been so lost in grief, refusing food, speaking of joining him. Then the chord began, and suddenly she had purpose again, a reason to continue." Father Antonius looked up, his eyes pleading for understanding. "Is it a sin to allow a harmless deception if it saves a life?" Before the master could respond, Ernst von Steinberg entered the sacristy, travel dust still on his clothes. His flight to Munich had been brief indeed. "Gentlemen," he said with forced casualness, "I understand we're to have a demonstration today." "How exciting." The master noticed Ernst's hands trembling slightly, the dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. "Your return was unexpected," he said neutrally. "Family obligations," Ernst replied. "My aunt needs support during these trying times." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "I know what you found, Master. Your thorough nature was never in doubt. The question is what you intend to do with your knowledge." From his pocket, Ernst produced a bank draft. The amount was substantial, more than the master would earn in 2 years. "For your discretion," Ernst said simply. "Report a mechanical failure, something that can be repaired. The phenomenon will cease, my aunt will accept that her husband has found peace, and everyone benefits." The master looked at the draft, thinking of Anna's letter, the problems in Munich, the struggling workshop. The money would solve many problems, buy new tools, secure contracts. "And if I refuse?" Ernst's expression hardened. "Then I tell my aunt about Father Antonius's knowledge and silence. I explain how her trusted priest allowed her to be deceived. I mention your correspondence with competitors in Munich, suggesting you prolong the investigation for higher fees. Truth, Master, can be shaped many ways." Father Antonius rose, his face pale but determined. "You would destroy your aunt's faith to protect yourself?" "I would protect her from unnecessary pain," Ernst countered. "The truth serves no one here. My uncle is dead. The will is executed. The estate's fate is sealed. Why add to the tragedy?" The master found himself thinking of Liesel's words about the Count's true musical voice, joyful rather than mournful. An idea began to form, subtle and complex like the organ's mechanism itself. "There might be another way," he said slowly. "One that serves truth without destroying faith." That afternoon, the Countess assembled in the chapel with Brother Thomas, Father Antonius, Ernst, and several senior servants, including Gottfried and Liesel. The master had arranged his demonstration carefully, with drawings and components laid out like evidence in a court proceeding. "Your ladyship," he began, "your organ is indeed remarkable, both in its original construction and in what it has recently revealed." He showed them the modified pipes, explaining in simple terms how temperature and pressure could cause them to sound. "These modifications are old, perhaps dating to the organ's original installation. The Silbermann workshop was known for such experiments." Brother Thomas examined the evidence carefully. "But why would it begin sounding only recently?" "Your husband, Countess, was a meticulous maintainer. His constant adjustments kept these old modifications silent. After his passing, without his careful hand, the organ began to express itself in unexpected ways." The master met the Countess's eyes directly. "I found his notebooks. He was aware of these quirks, planning to address them after the Feast of St. Lawrence." The Countess's voice was barely a whisper. "Then it wasn't Friedrich?" "Not directly, no. But consider, his sudden absence allowed the organ to speak in a way it never could while he lived. Perhaps that itself is a message, that even our absence can create something meaningful." Ernst started to object, but Father Antonius placed a restraining hand on his arm. The priest understood what the master was doing, creating a truth that encompassed the facts without destroying faith. The master continued, producing the Count's musical journal. "However, I did find these compositions, written in your husband's hand. Songs he never had the chance to play, dedicated to you. With your permission, I would like to modify the organ's mechanism, so that instead of the mournful chord, it plays one of these melodies each morning at dawn. A different kind of ghost, if you will, but one that speaks of joy rather than sorrow." The Countess took the journal with shaking hands, recognizing her husband's writing immediately. Tears ran down her cheeks as she read his dedication. "For M, when the silence becomes too much to bear." Brother Thomas nodded slowly. "An interesting solution. The phenomenon ceases, but memory continues in a different form. Rome would find no objection to mechanical music, properly understood." Ernst's relief was palpable, though he tried to hide it. The master had given him an escape without exposure, though the price was the bank draft that was quietly returned, torn into pieces. That evening, the master worked alone in the chapel, implementing his solution. He removed all traces of the deceptive mechanism, but installed a simple clockwork device connected to a music box cylinder. Each dawn it would play 30 seconds of the Count's final composition, a piece filled with the quiet joy of a life well lived. Liesel found him as he finished, bringing a lamp against the gathering darkness. "You could have taken the money," she said quietly. "No one would have known." "I would have known," the master replied, testing the mechanism one final time. "A craftsman's reputation is built over decades, but can be destroyed in a moment. Besides, the Count deserved better than to have his memory used for extortion." She smiled, an expression wise beyond her 19 years. "The Countess has asked me to become her reader, officially. She says if her husband could keep secrets, so can she. Education, she's decided, is not the threat she once thought." As the master packed his tools for the final time, he reflected on the nature of truth and deception. The organ would never again produce its phantom chord, but in its place would be something genuine, the Count's actual voice, preserved in musical notation, speaking of love rather than manipulation. The 12th of November arrived with a kind of pristine clarity that only mountain winters could provide, every surface covered in frost that sparkled like crushed diamonds. The master stood in the chapel before dawn, waiting for the first test of his new mechanism. The Countess had insisted on being present, accompanied by Father Antonius and, surprisingly, Ernst, who seemed to have aged years in the past few days. At exactly 6 o'clock, as the first light touched the stained glass windows, the clockwork engaged. Instead of the mournful chord that had haunted the castle for months, a gentle melody began. 16 bars of the Count's final composition played on the organ's softest flute stops. The music was simple but profound, like a conversation between old friends who needed no words to understand each other. The Countess wept silently, but these were different tears than before. "That's Friedrich," she whispered. "That's how he truly was, gentle, thoughtful, finding beauty in small things." She turned to the master. "You've given him back to me, not as a ghost, but as he lived." Ernst stood apart, his expression unreadable. After the others had left, he approached the master. "You could have destroyed me," he said quietly. "Why didn't you?" The master continued packing his tools, considering his response. "Your uncle's journal showed he knew about your difficulties, the missing items, the debts. Yet he never expelled you. Perhaps he hoped you would find your own way to redemption." "Redemption," Ernst repeated bitterly. "A luxury for those who can afford it." "My creditors in Vienna care nothing for redemption, only for payment." He paused, then added, "The mechanism, it wasn't entirely my idea. A man in Munich, someone who knew about the will before it was public. He provided the technical knowledge. I provided the access." The master's hands stilled. A man in Munich who knew about organs and wills? His mind immediately went to Zimmermann, his competitor, but he pushed the thought aside. Speculation without proof served no purpose. "What will you do now?" "Leave," Ernst said simply. "My aunt has agreed to a modest settlement, enough to reach America. There's no future for me here, not after this. Perhaps in a new world I can become a new man." He laughed shortly. "Or at least a different kind of failure." Brother Thomas found the master in the organ loft, making final adjustments. The Dominican had spent the morning interviewing household members, his investigation thorough but gentle. "An elegant solution," he observed. "Truth served without cruelty. Rome appreciates such subtlety, though they'd never admit it officially." "The church has its own ghosts to manage," the master replied, thinking of all the relics and miracles that might not withstand close examination. "Indeed, but faith and fact need not be enemies. Your mechanism, the dawn music, it creates a ritual, a daily reminder of love and loss. That's more valuable than any supernatural phenomenon." Brother Thomas paused, then asked, "Do you believe in anything beyond the material, Master? Or is it all mechanics to you?" The master considered the question while adjusting the tension on the clockwork spring. "I believe in what persists.
The Count is gone, but his music remains. The organ will outlive us all, carrying songs we'll never hear to people we'll never meet. If that's not a form of immortality, I don't know what is. Gottfried arrived with news that the carriage was ready for the master's departure.
But the Countess had requested one final meeting, a formal settling of accounts in the castle's study. The master found her there, looking frailer, but somehow more at peace than when he'd arrived. "Your fee," she said, presenting a leather purse, "with additional compensation for your discretion." The amount was generous, but not excessive, carefully calculated to show appreciation without suggesting bribery. "There's another matter," she continued, producing a sealed letter. "This arrived this morning, addressed to you but sent to my attention, from Munich." The master recognized Zimmermann's seal immediately. Inside, his competitor's florid script offered condolences on the unfortunate misunderstanding that had affected the master's reputation, and suggested that perhaps they could find mutually beneficial arrangements in the future. The threat was subtle but clear: cooperate or face continued sabotage. The Countess watched him read. Ernst wasn't the only one with conspiracies, it seems. The world is full of people who mistake cunning for intelligence. She moved to the window, looking out at the mountains. "My husband used to say that mountains endure because they don't resist the weather, they accept it. The wind and rain shape them, but cannot destroy them." She turned back to him. "I know more than you might suppose, Master. Father Antonius's crisis of conscience was rather loud for a confession. Ernst's guilty pacing kept the household awake. And you? Your careful words that protected everyone while serving truth. I'm old, not oblivious." The master felt a mix of embarrassment and admiration. "You knew?" "I suspected. But suspicion and certainty are different things, and sometimes the gap between them is where mercy lives." She smiled, the expression transforming her face. "The dawn music is perfect." Friedrich would have loved the irony. His planned maintenance creating a more beautiful mystery than any ghost could. Liesel appeared with a package wrapped in oilcloth. "For your journey," she said, handing it to the master. Inside was a book, a first edition of Bach's Art of Fugue, with margin notes in what looked like the Count's hand. "The Countess thought you should have it. She says craftsmen should support each other across centuries." As the master's carriage pulled away from Schloss Adlerstein, he looked back at the castle, now golden in the morning sun. From the chapel tower, he could hear the organ playing, not the mechanical dawn song, but real music. Someone, perhaps Liesel, taking advantage of her new position, was practicing scales. The sound was hesitant, imperfect, but alive with possibility. The journey down the mountain gave him time to think about everything that had transpired. He had come to solve a mechanical mystery and found himself entangled in human complexities that no amount of technical knowledge could fully address. The phantom chord had been silenced, but the echoes of human ambition, grief, and redemption would continue long after the last note faded. At the train station in Garmisch, he found an unexpected figure waiting, Ernst, dressed for travel, his cases already loaded. They stood awkwardly on the platform, two men who knew too much about each other for comfort. "Your train to Munich arrives first," Ernst said unnecessarily. "Mine to Bremen doesn't leave until evening." The master nodded, then made a decision.
From his bag, he withdrew one of the Count's musical journals, not the incriminating one, but one filled with simple hymn arrangements. "For your journey," he said, pressing it into Ernst's hands.
Your uncle would want his music to travel, even to America. Ernst's composure finally cracked, tears running down his cheeks as he clutched the journal. I did love him, you know, in my way. It just wasn't enough to overcome what I loved more. The train carried the master back toward Munich through a landscape transformed by early winter. The Bavarian countryside wearing November like a gray wool coat. He sat in his second-class compartment, the Count's annotated box score open on his lap, though his mind wandered from the mathematical precision of fugues to the messy complexities of human nature. The rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails created its own music, a mechanical percussion that reminded him how even the most modern inventions followed ancient rhythms. As fields and forests blurred past the window, he found himself composing a letter to Anna in his head, trying to explain what had transpired at Schloss Adlerstein. How could he convey the delicate balance between truth and compassion he had tried to maintain? How could he describe the phantom chord without making it sound like either a cheap trick or a genuine haunting? His sister, practical as she was, understood that their craft involved more than wood and metal. It involved trust, reputation, and sometimes the navigation of human hearts as complex as any organ's mechanism. The Munich station appeared through coal smoke and late afternoon mist, like a great iron cathedral of progress. The master collected his cases, noting with satisfaction that his tools had survived another journey, each wrapped piece exactly where it should be. The familiar chaos of the city embraced him. Vendors calling their wares, carriage wheels on cobblestones, the distant whistle of factories that never slept. After the mountain silence of Adlerstein, it was both overwhelming and oddly comforting. The walk to Sendlinger Street took him through the old quarter, where Gaslight was just beginning to replace the day's weak sun. He passed the workshop of Zimmermann, his competitor, noting with grim satisfaction that the windows were dark, a closed for repairs sign hanging crooked on the door. Whatever scheme Zimmermann had been part of, it seemed to have brought its own consequences. Anna heard him coming up the stairs. She always did, claiming his step had a particular rhythm that announced him like a signature. She opened the door before he could reach for his key, her expression mixing relief, irritation, and curiosity in the way only siblings could manage. 10 days, she said, by way of greeting. 10 days of managing your disasters while you played detective in a castle. But her scolding lacked real heat, and she had prepared his favorite meal, pork knuckle with sauerkraut and dark bread that could have anchored a ship. As they ate, he told her everything, from the first mysterious chord to Ernst's tears on the station platform. Anna listened without interrupting, her expression growing thoughtful as the tale unfolded. "You did right," she said finally, clearing the dishes with her characteristic efficiency. "Though others might have taken the money and slept sound. This city's full of people who'd sell their shadows if the price was right." The master moved through his workshop, reacquainting himself with each tool, each half-finished project. The practice organ wheezed a greeting when he tried the bellows, its leaky wind chest indeed needing attention, but that could wait until morning. Tonight, he wanted simply to be among familiar things, instruments that held no secrets, mechanisms that operated exactly as designed. A knock interrupted his contemplation. Anna showed in an unexpected visitor, Liesel,
dressed in traveling clothes, carrying a small case.
She looked different away from the castle. Younger, but also more determined. "Forgive the intrusion," she said formally, then smiled. "But I had to come to Munich anyway. The Countess is establishing a library in her husband's memory, and she's sent me to purchase books." She produced a letter, sealed with the Steinberg arms. Inside, the Countess had written in her own hand, thanking the master again for his discretion and wisdom. But there was more. A commission for a new instrument, a small organ for the village church near the castle, to be built in the master's workshop and installed next summer. The fee was generous, enough to secure the workshop's future for at least 2 years. She says, Liesel added, that ghosts shouldn't have the only music worth hearing. The living deserve their songs too. She paused, then continued more quietly. She also wanted you to know that Ernst wrote from Bremen. He's found passage to Boston, where apparently there's need for men who understand European art and antiquities. Perhaps America will give him the second chance Germany couldn't. After Liesel departed to find her lodgings, the master sat at his workbench contemplating the commission. A new organ built from scratch with no secrets, no mechanisms beyond those needed to make music. He began sketching designs, losing himself in the pure mathematics of pipe scales, the poetry of wind pressure ratios. This was what he knew, what he trusted, the honest craft of making instruments that would sing truth for generations. Anna found him there at midnight, still working by lamplight, surrounded by drawings and calculations. "You never did tell me," she said, settling into the chair reserved for customers, "what you really think happened. Was it all just mechanical, or was there something more?" The master set down his pen, considering. "The mechanism was real, manufactured, deliberate. But what it stirred in people, the grief, the hope, the fear, that was beyond any craft. Perhaps that's the real mystery, how we humans insist on finding meaning in random sounds, purpose in accident." He paused, then smiled slightly. Or perhaps the Count did speak after all, just not through supernatural means. His absence allowed the organ to sound, his journals revealed the truth, his music now greets each dawn. The dead influence the living through what they leave behind. A week later, life had returned to its familiar rhythm. The master worked on small repairs, tuning the instruments of churches that could still afford maintenance. Zimmerman's shop remained closed, rumors suggesting he had fled to avoid creditors. The master felt no satisfaction in his rival's downfall, only a weary recognition that those who scheme against others often entangle themselves worst of all. One evening, as November surrendered to December and the first real snow began to fall, a letter arrived from Schloss Adlerstein, not from the Countess or Liesel, but from Father Antonius. The priest wrote that the dawn music continued to bring comfort, that the Countess had begun receiving visitors again, that the castle seemed lighter somehow, as if a shadow had lifted. He also mentioned that Brother Thomas's report to Rome had praised the master's handling of the situation, noting that truth and faith had been preserved in equal measure. "There is one more thing," Father Antonius wrote. "I have been studying the Count's musical journals, the ones you left behind. In the margins of one piece, he wrote something I thought you should know. The organ is like the human soul, complex, sometimes difficult, requiring constant maintenance, but capable of incredible beauty when properly cared for. I think he would have liked you, Master." You understood his instrument better than most understood him. The master folded the letter carefully, placing it in the drawer where he kept important documents. Outside, Munich settled into winter, the snow muffling the city's harsh edges, making even the factory smoke seem softer. In his workshop, surrounded by the tools of his trade and the warmth of his sister's care, he felt a deep contentment. The phantom chord was silent, but its echoes had taught him something valuable about the music that existed between truth and kindness, between craft and compassion. He picked up his pen and began to design the new organ for the village church, each pipe calculated to sing clearly, honestly, without deception, but with beauty. It would be his answer to phantoms and schemes, to those who confused complexity with mystery. Sometimes, he had learned, the greatest sophistication was simplicity, and the deepest truth was found not in what we hide, but in what we choose to reveal.